The night was a tapestry of shadows and silence as I drove alone on that desolate stretch of highway, a ribbon of asphalt cutting through the heart of the wilderness. The moon was but a sliver in the sky, offering little more than a feeble glimmer to pierce the inky darkness. I'd always been a nocturnal wanderer, relishing the solitude of the late hours, but this night felt different, as if the very air was charged with an ancient and unsettling energy. The trees on either side of the road stood like sentinels, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers, their leaves rustling in the wind like whispers from the abyss. The road seemed to stretch on endlessly, twisting and turning, leading me further into the unknown. It was as if I had entered a realm where time and space had lost their meaning. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss, that I was not alone on this forsaken road. I glanced nervously into the rearview mirror, half expecting to see a pair of malevolent eyes staring back at me. But there was nothing there, only the empty expanse of the road disappearing into the blackness. The radio, my only connection to the outside world, emitted a faint crackling noise interspersed with bursts of static. The voices of the late-night radio hosts took on a haunting quality, their words laced with an eerie resonance that sent shivers down my spine. It was as if the radio itself was trying to communicate something I couldn't quite grasp. As I continued to drive deeper into the night, the sense of unease grew stronger. The whispers of the wind outside seemed to coalesce into a chorus of voices, each one speaking in a language I couldn't comprehend. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, and a cold sweat trickled down my spine. And then, just as I rounded a particularly sharp bend in the road, I saw her. A woman standing in the middle of the highway, bathed in the dim glow of my headlights. I slammed on the brakes, my heart leaping into my throat as the tires screeched in protest. I came to a stop just a few feet from her, my pulse racing. She was a specter of the night, her form ethereal and indistinct. Her long, flowing gown seemed to merge with the darkness around her, and her hair hung in tangled strands that obscured her face. I could feel her presence, a palpable force that seemed to press in on me from all sides. With trembling hands, I rolled down my window and called out to her, my voice barely more than a whisper. "Are you okay? Do you need help?" She did not respond, standing there in eerie silence, her gaze fixed on some unseen point in the distance. I could feel the weight of her stare, a gaze that seemed to bore into the very core of my being. It was then that she slowly lifted her head, revealing eyes that were a void of infinite darkness, like twin portals to some unfathomable abyss. My blood ran cold and a sense of dread washed over me. Before I could react, she began to move, her body gliding across the road with an unnatural grace. She moved closer, her footsteps echoing in the silence, each one sending a chill down my spine. I fumbled for the door handle, my fingers trembling as I tried to retreat back into the safety of my car. But as I turned to make my escape, I saw that the road behind me had vanished, replaced by an impenetrable wall of darkness. Panic surged through me, and I turned back to the woman who was now just inches away from my car. Her eyes bore into mine, and her lips curled into a sinister smile. In that moment, I knew that I had stumbled upon something ancient and malevolent, a force that existed beyond the boundaries of reality. It hungered for something I couldn't comprehend, and I was its unwitting prey. With a sudden burst of speed, the woman lunged forward, her fingers reaching out to touch me. I screamed, slamming my foot on the gas pedal, and my car shot forward with a violent jolt. The world outside became a blur as I raced away from that nightmarish encounter, the woman's haunting scream fading into the distance. I drove for what felt like an eternity, the road twisting and turning as if leading me through a maze of nightmares. When I finally emerged from that cursed stretch of highway, I was drenched in sweat, my heart pounding in my chest. As I pulled into my driveway and turned off the engine, I knew that I had narrowly escaped a fate too terrible to contemplate. The memory of that night would haunt me forever, a chilling reminder that there are things lurking in the shadows, things that defy explanation and comprehension. The darkness holds secrets that should never be uncovered, for once you venture into its depths, you may never return. The moon hung low in the sky, casting eerie shadows on the winding road ahead. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, my knuckles turning white as I navigated the desolate highway. The dim glow of my headlights barely pierced the darkness, and the night seemed to press in on me from all sides. I had always been a bit of a night owl, and driving alone at night had never bothered me before. But this night was different. A sense of unease had settled over me like a heavy fog, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The road stretched out ahead, a seemingly endless ribbon of asphalt cutting through the dense forest on either side. Tall trees loomed overhead, their branches clawing at the night sky, casting strange, shifting shapes on the road. It was as if the forest itself was alive, watching and waiting. I tried to shake off the feeling, turning up the radio in a feeble attempt to drown out my own thoughts. But the music only added to the eeriness of the night. The staticky voices of the late-night radio hosts seemed to echo with a sinister undertone, and the songs took on a haunting quality, as if they were trying to tell me something. As I drove deeper into the night, my unease grew. I couldn't help but glance nervously into my rearview mirror, half expecting to see something lurking in the darkness behind me. Each time I looked, though, there was nothing there but the empty road and the endless forest. The road twisted and turned, and I had the eerie sensation that I was going in circles, that I would never escape this dark and lonely highway. I checked my phone, but there was no signal. I was completely on my own, lost in the wilderness of the night. Suddenly, I saw something up ahead. It was a figure standing in the middle of the road, bathed in the feeble glow of my headlights. My heart leapt into my throat, and I slammed on the brakes, swerving to avoid a collision. I came to a screeching halt just inches from the mysterious figure. As I caught my breath, I could see that it was a woman, her long, disheveled hair obscuring her face. She wore a tattered white dress that seemed to glow in the darkness. She stood perfectly still, her arms hanging limply at her sides. It was as if she had been waiting for me. I rolled down my window, my voice shaking as I called out to her. "Are you okay? Do you need help?" There was no response. The woman didn't move, didn't acknowledge my presence in any way. She just stood there, like a ghostly apparition in the night. Fear gnawed at my insides, but I couldn't just leave her there. I opened the car door and cautiously approached her, my footsteps echoing in the silence. As I got closer, I could see that her eyes were wide and vacant, as if she were in a trance. I reached out a trembling hand to touch her shoulder, but before I could make contact, she suddenly jerked her head up, her hair parting to reveal a pale, gaunt face. Her eyes were completely black, like twin voids that seemed to suck the light from the world. I recoiled in horror, stumbling backward. The woman let out a blood-curdling scream that pierced the night, and then she was gone, disappearing into the darkness as if she had never been there. I stood there, frozen in shock and terror, my heart pounding in my chest. I stumbled back to my car, fumbling with the keys as I tried to start the engine. The car roared to life, and I peeled out of there as fast as I could, my tires screeching on the asphalt. I didn't stop until I was miles away from that nightmarish encounter. As I drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had narrowly escaped something unspeakably evil. The memory of those black eyes haunted my every thought, and I knew that I would never be the same again. I eventually made it home, but I couldn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring up at the ceiling, replaying the events of that fateful drive over and over in my mind. I knew that I had encountered something supernatural, something beyond comprehension. To this day, I can't drive alone at night without feeling a shiver of dread. The memory of that night lingers, a dark and twisted specter that haunts me, a constant reminder that there are things in this world that defy explanation, things that lurk in the shadows and wait for the unwary to cross their path. The clock on the dashboard read 2:33 a.m. as I sped down the desolate, winding road, shrouded in an inky blackness that seemed to swallow the world whole. The faint hum of the engine was my only companion, and the eerie silence of the night weighed heavily on my shoulders. I had always been fearless, reveling in the solitude of the open road, but tonight was different. A sense of foreboding had settled over me like a deathly shroud, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was hurtling toward something unspeakably sinister. The moon, a pale sliver of silver, cast ghostly shadows that danced menacingly across the asphalt. The trees lining the road loomed like twisted sentinels, their gnarled branches reaching out as if to snatch me from the safety of my car. My grip on the steering wheel was vice-like, my knuckles pale and bloodless. The chill that crept into my bones was not from the cold night air, but from the palpable malevolence that seemed to emanate from the very earth itself. I glanced nervously in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see a pair of malevolent eyes staring back at me. But the reflection that greeted me was nothing more than the empty road shrouded in darkness. There was no solace to be found there. The minutes dragged on, and with each passing second, the tension in the car grew thicker, like a fog rolling in from the abyss. I could hear the soft, almost imperceptible whispering that seemed to seep from the very fabric of the night. It was as if the darkness itself had a voice that whispered of unspeakable horrors and unrelenting dread. My heart pounded in my chest as I rounded a bend in the road, and that's when I saw it, a figure standing at the side of the road, bathed in the ghostly glow of my headlights. I slammed on the brakes, the tires screeching in protest as I skidded to a stop just a few feet away from the apparition. It was a woman, or at least it had once been. Her tattered, blood-soaked dress clung to her emaciated frame, and her matted, disheveled hair hung in front of her face like a veil of shadows. She seemed ethereal, as if she were not quite of this world. I called out to her, my voice trembling with fear. "Are you okay? Do you need help?" There was no response. The woman stood there, swaying gently in the cold night breeze, her eyes hidden behind the curtain of hair. I cautiously stepped out of the car and approached her, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. The air around her seemed to grow colder with each step, and a sickening sense of dread washed over me. As I reached out to touch her shoulder, she slowly lifted her head, revealing eyes that were as black as the void of space, empty and soulless. Her lips curled into a twisted smile, revealing rows of sharp, jagged teeth. A guttural, otherworldly sound escaped her throat, and the darkness seemed to swirl around her, enveloping her in a suffocating shroud. I stumbled back, my mind reeling with terror as I realized that I was face to face with something beyond comprehension, something that defied the laws of nature and reason. It was a malevolent force, a creature of the night, and it hungered for my very soul. I sprinted back to my car, my breath coming in ragged gasps, and slammed the door shut just as the woman let out a blood-curdling scream that echoed through the night. The car's engine roared to life, and I peeled out of there, leaving behind the nightmarish vision of that wretched creature. But the horror did not end there. As I sped away, the road itself seemed to twist and contort, becoming a nightmarish labyrinth from which there was no escape. The trees that lined the road reached out with gnarled limbs, clawing at the car as if trying to drag me back into the abyss. I drove faster and faster, the world around me warping and distorting, a nightmarish kaleidoscope of terror. The woman's unholy scream echoed in my ears, a relentless reminder of the darkness that pursued me. Hours passed, or maybe it was only minutes. Time lost all meaning in that nightmarish landscape. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the nightmare ended. I found myself back on a familiar stretch of road, the moon hanging low in the sky and the darkness retreating. I finally arrived home, shaken to my core but alive. The memory of that night will haunt me forever, a chilling reminder that there are things in this world that defy explanation, things that lurk in the darkest corners of our reality, waiting to ensnare the unwary in their malevolent grasp. I now know that the night holds secrets that are best left undisturbed. For once you venture into the darkness, there may be no way back.